वामन कृष्ण पांडुरंग आनंद परिज्ञान गुरु सद्गुजात शंकर सद्गुरु गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति।
Thank you, Umapachi. Requesting everyone to please keep their audio on mute and video also off unless requested to present. I now request Rajan Kalyanpur Ma'am to do the welcome address. Rajan Kalyanpur Ma'am.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thanks, Gopi Mom. Friends, good evening. On behalf of Canara Saraswat Association, I welcome you all to a presentation on the Union Budget 2021 by Shri Sharath Yellur, who has a great insight into this very specialized subject that requires a deep analysis to gauge the effects on various segments of society, trade, and industry. A special welcome to Mr. Sharath Yellur for having readily agreed to KSA's request for making such an online presentation to the KSA fraternity today. This program is brought to you under the aegis of the KSA CSN initiative, where CSN stands for the Chitrapur Saraswat Network. This is an initiative conceptualized to provide a platform for the Chitrapur Saraswat Brahmin Samaj to pool talents, resources, and experiences in the community through interactions for initiation and advancement of professionals and entrepreneurs for their material prosperity. In other words, besides aiming at professionals and the employed advancing in their professions and careers, entrepreneur development is also being promoted. It is a known fact that our community has very few entrepreneurs, and this initiative aims at increasing this number. Recently, on 30th January, over 151 existing and aspiring entrepreneurs interacted with our president and vice president, which resulted in very useful suggestions for taking the KSA CSN initiative forward and fulfilling its mission effectively. We do require the active involvement of our community members to make this initiative more effective and look forward to your support and cooperation. With these few words, I once again welcome you on behalf of KSA to this session on the Union Budget by Mr. Sharath Yellur, and trust it will be very useful to all of you and enable you to understand the Union Budget and its fine print better. Thank you very much.
Rajan ma'am,
Yeah.
Am I seen and heard?
No, 1 minute. Where are you?
Yes, ma'am. You have been.
Gautam Munukele have sign in.
Wait.
Now you can be seen. Yes.
Presentation coach Vetari.
Gautam ma'am. Please talk about CSN and present whatever, if it is possible technically. Please go
Wait,
ahead.
I just see I'm hack karta sa. I'm trying to share the presentation.
Yeah, please.
Share जातं sir. दिसतं sir.
No, we can see you on the screen. You have to yet to share the presentation.
Sharing rights देऊन का पडतं इतकी.
Rajan ma'am.
Gautam, you already have the right to present.
Gautam Dada, Mandar here.
हाँ सांग.
Left hand side to participants मुद्दिस्तने +49 +50. Click on that participants.
Left hand side
Bottom of the screen, bottom left if you see participants, click on participants and then you'll get an option to mute all. Above that, okay, so you my participants you can click mute all and ताज वही reach you red boxes पर leave.
नहीं मगर हंगे कल की click जाए ना. I'm trying to click +43 दिसतंस मका.
ताजरी click on that.
No, it's not. It's showing the arrow only. It's not showing the finger.
Gautam, can you see share content? Control.
I tried that.
E. There is another alternative. Control plus Shift plus E. Try that.
आपने इधर दिसतं समोर entire screen म्हणून केलं हवे. But मग ते open share दिसना. The share field is blurred. Anyway, तुला presentation असतं तू open कर.
Share will be next to the leave button on the top.
नहीं open share tray केलं मैं. Desktop window केलं, entire screen केलं. जला मग ते share highlight जाऊं का नाही ते highlight जाए ना. कंचारी Microsoft.
Next to that mic button, the share content म्हणून एक button असं दिसतं.
Thanks केलं मैं open share tray म्हणत मका. But when I click on that, anyway, I will skip this thing. There's no point in spending time on this.
Sharath, can you just send it on the this one chat box? I'll present.
This is Shashank here. You have done everything you are supposed to. There's only one element missing. It's a share screen को ना पड़तो क्या option है पड़ा. तन तो तू actually ते screen is select कर का पहले. Then you can click on share. That is the only step that's missing. Everything आते तो perfect केले. फक्त त्या एक चीज.
केले मग open झाले हा screen. हाँ. Presentation open है just मगला in the background.
Why? So then तुला दोन screens असत वाय. तुला एक laptop आणि एक monitor अशी दोन screen असत वाय. तुला by any chance?
ना. आव ते है केला. Mobile आते चालू असं. But
if you have only one screen, then it should literally be तू कल केलं पड़ा. ते हाजे video ची बाजू की सान share screen असं. ते click करी.
वही केलं.
Right? And तदनंतर you will be prompted with an option. A window comes up. Right?
In that window, see entire screen application window है. कल्ले केल तरी ते share म्हणून field अस पड़ा.
Entire screen select करी. Actually select करी. You have to select that.
अच्छा. हाँ okay.
And then now you can click on share.
Adista.
There you are. Perfect.
Thanks a lot. God bless you. Thank you.
No problem. Happy to help.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot. Friends, sorry for this technical glitch on my part. साम्यांगल परमपूज्य साम्यांगल चरणांतू वंदन कोरनो हे आम्ही इनिशिएटिव्ह स्टार्ट केलेला आहे about 2 years back, and the website which has been created was inaugurated in the presence of Parampujya Swamiji at the Mallapur Chaturmas, last Mallapur Chaturmas. Now taking you as CSN, as Rajan Ma'am said, आमका चित्रापूर सारस्वतांका material prosperity करूक this initiative was founded, KSA actively encouraged us. Praveen Ma'am, Jairam Ma'am, Kishore Ma'am, they have been a very good and strong source of support. आमगेले आमरी existing जे entrepreneurs असतात तांकां connects share करून help them grow, because normally the best way of the way that we know about growing is cold calls or meeting application korcha, empanelment korcha. But then when somebody suggests or recommends your name, you have a better chance of getting an entry. Of course, other commercial and other parameters do apply. So if if other things being equal or fairly equal, prefer a Bhanap. That's the motto that we are going by. And as Gopinath Ma'am said, he's coined this thing, one up for Bhanap. So एक my existing entrepreneurs business तांगेल वाढवून चाक help करचे आणि कोणाक नवीन business येऊनचे सर तांगेल own setups करचे सर ती तांका business setup करू का. This will be done in phases. Helping existing entrepreneurs is the first phase, which is already in, and there are various activities we'll see. Second and third, helping those employed get better jobs, and those seeking jobs get good placements. And the next initiative, but that will be slightly in the future. Goals, Mary, as I said, Saganka encourage at least Amchi Galanka to source from Bhanap service providers when we want something for ourselves. But the most important thing is recommend a Bhanap to a service user. The user may not be necessarily a Bhanap. Bhanap asल्या बऱ्यांची आणि Bhanap आणि आस्का Bhanap entrepreneur vendors त्यांनी encourage करकाती. But also equivalent important is आम्ही बाहेरच्यांक introduce करून help Bhanap expand their contact source also. Magir encourage all Amchis to help a fellow Bhanap get a job, all other things being equal as usual. And create an entrepreneurship culture, high achievement culture. Mary, we amka ashi hetu as ki Mary haji success is polonu. Mary काम सोडून आणते येऊ का business आणतो अशी म्हणी येतं. If you look at it positively, आमची गला यो काम सोडून business आयला बाबा म्हणचे आहे असं त्या मालवणी आणत म्हणताल पण अरे दिवाळीची तयारी कर म्हणावं म्हणून कोणी बिझनेस करता म्हण की तशी थोड्याची काही भानपांगल अशी विच इज ऑफ कोर्स चेंजिंग क्वाइट अ लॉट नाव. ताजेर आम्ही कल केला हाऊ टू डेव्हलप अन एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप कल्चर म्हणून आम्ही मुलाखत घेतली. आता थंय 4 मुलाखत झाली म्हणजे सक्सेसफुल आमची गला भानपची आसती दुर्गेश मामू, प्रकाश पडुकोण, प्रफुल्ल चंदावरकर इज अ यंग एंटरप्रेन्योर फ्रॉम पुणे आणि श्री हेमा पाची आणि अशोक हेमाडी तांगेल त्या venture which was taken over by I think some multinational took them over. So they yes Gopiman Schneider yes. So तान सांगा ती 4 मुलाखत झालेला आहे. अनेक म्हणारी WhatsApp Telegram ग्रुप केल्या ती. Since WhatsApp addition members are limitation, we have also shifted to Telegram, and sooner or later the whole thing will migrate to Telegram on a full-time basis. आणि बुधवाराचे आणि शनिवाराचे आम्ही मेंबर सांगत तांगेले बिझनेस आणि प्रोफेशनल प्रोडक्ट सर्व्हिसेस प्रमोट करू पोस्ट करू का परमिशन असं. अनेक वेळार आम्ही केल्ल्या म्हळ्यार वी हेल्ड वेबिनार्स by domain experts. The first one was by Ajit Kaikini ma'am of Buoyancy, Magiri Vivek Khatangdi ma'am from Ahmedabad, who is a leading pharma marketing expert. Magir Kiran Mankikar, who is an IT expert, he spoke on cyber threats. Then a group of youngsters were Samir Haladi Mana, Simrita Basru, Divya Vinekar, and Avinash Nempalli. Tanni Tangtangel Hantu, they held a joint webinar and by Hemant Kambarbail. अशी 5 वेबिनार झाली आणि सक्सेस स्टोरीज मध्ये there was a deal of almost 18 lakhs stuck between 2 members who their names have been withheld on request. And food items करतली from outside Bombay successfully तिने execute केला interstate order. She supplied material to Calcutta on a reference from a member of the group. आणि KSA also त्यांनी लीड घेतलाय. Some service contracts were awarded to Amchigalas who met the parameters in their तांगेल parameters कोणी meet केल तांका त्यांनी preference दिवन service contracts दिलेला आहे. मागीर एक new entrepreneur who started his enterprise during lockdown. He was again food products. Amchigal society to counter setup Kurukani, another member helped that. So these are the few success stories that we are able to announce due to shortage of time. Magiri other networking initiatives मध्ये entrepreneur club meets म्हणून आम्ही करचेसाठी एक केलेला आहे मॉक आता 14th आणि 1-on-1 असते. 1-on-1 is two members इधर बैसून face to face meeting करतात. It's like an informal interview of each other. Magir one with many is where more than more than two people meet together and exchange information about each other. That in the slides and the detail kartati. ECMs normally preferably on site askati physical meeting, but at sadhya given the prevailing conditions we are starting with online meetings and to pre-decided intervals on meetings जातात and where members meet, interact, gel एकमेका सांगत information share करून एक bond करच प्रयत्न जाता आणि succeed आहे जाता. आणि the meets across locations will have a common agenda. सगळ्यांना एक standardized agenda देऊन the clubs will operate on a standard format. Next ECM is on 14th February. And we have nomenclatured it Meet Your Business Valentine. Because Valentine, I think, is not just about roses and meeting your loved one. Your loved one could be your loved business partner also. So finding a right business partner also is very important because if you see that 18 lakhs success story, it is between two people who are actually what as the one of them said, chuddy buddies. They know each other since their childhood, but then we have never done business with somebody who's by mean my neighbor. So hai platform I actually discussed business with people whom I knew for a long time but never interacted on a business platform. So the Meet Your Business Valentine Munami Kurchusati will structure and make a formal announcement in the next couple of days. One-on-ones malwari face-to-face meeting between two people, location, time, आणि त्याची किती वेळ मिळायचे हे सगळं mutually decide करू जाता. I have done a one-on-one which extended for 6 hours, but these are rare. Normally 2 hours suggest ko jata. But antu you discuss anything that you want to discuss between the two of y'all. It could be business, social, cultural, personal goals. Somebody may want to be a singer, somebody may be interested in collecting stamps, some culling as per one comfort levels, and aim to try and gel well together. At the end of the meeting, the two people should end up having at least a beginning of feeling comfortable with each other. Because normally कल जाता गोत नातील मनुष्यागल accident जल तर आम्ही वचना ती पुळंचाक अरे कोण की बाम जल आमगल गुरताचा का बॉट कापिल तर ह्यो कल झालाय म्हणून आम्ही with concern we go. So naturally that gelling together is very important, and the same applies for a business also. One with many is an extended version. आम्ही 4-5 maximum suggest करता because त्याच्यानंतर चिक्के overload and time load जाता. 2-2.5 तासांतू मेळणू. Whatever you do in a one-on-one, do it with a time frame. 10 मिनिटं 15 मिनिटं per person करणू. 2-2.5 तासाभितर मीटिंग जाता. And end of the meeting you decide की बाबा कोणागल कल गोल्स असती त्या कल कनेक्ट जाऊन का ती ताका तिका आणि त्या कनेक्ट्स if you
Gautam, we lost your voice.
So that whenever issue comes, I get a connect in SVC, then I remember, Gopinath Mamma Zaishilam. So then I connect Gopinath Mamma with SVC and the matter ends there. Well, that's all we are supposed to do. Put the person in touch with the desired connect. Rest other things are left to his her capabilities and the parameters and the meeting of those parameters. आम्ही आता ते अराउंड डझन 12-13 वन many केल्या ती, and people have expressed satisfaction, and a couple of youngsters also have posted their happy experiences on the WhatsApp group. मागीर knowledge sessions मिळेल हांवें sharing जाल्या ती 5-6. IIC is one of the main knowledge sessions of this year. Praveen Mamal first sala at taxation actually, which will be an annual feature because budget jalki there will be a talk on budgets. Magirita local clubs we already spoken about. Like we are creating 2 data banks. One is a data bank of professionals which is already in operation on the website. Then you have to an entrepreneur, either budding or currently active entrepreneur, goes onto the website and lists his or her information in the given formats. And we would be encouraging Bhanups through various social media and other personal connects to go and refer to this website as and when some need arises, either a product. I'm looking for Amchigala masala. So maybe once I go there, then we find that Amchigala masala person on that website in the database. And also, as per Kishore Mam's suggestion, we'll be creating a PDF file of the members listed on the database and circulated to members periodically, maybe once in a quarter. We'll update that PDF and circulate it. Second will be a private confidential database which will be maintained by administrators. Jobs if any need comes, we will put the people into connect with the job seekers or job change seekers that way, but that is at a later phase. And panels under the entrepreneurship development initiative, we will be starting panels of different geographical areas, persons from willing to serve based on these domain expertise in taxation, project finance, HR, legal, product manufacturing. These are basically only indicative. There could be more panels as and when a need is seen or a need arises or somebody suggests कि बा हम तो थोड़ा panelist असला बर है. So we will keep updating this list as the days go by and we get more experience in this. थोडे panels चे नाव येऊनच्या लागल्यांती. तुमगेल गुरतान तुझा आज attend करतल कोणा काही offer करूच असल्यारी. But this will be initially pro bono. आणि Mukhari, as the connect develops and the work goes on, then the 2 persons can take a decision whether it is going to shift to paid or whatever. So a request yana pude, then what the person will not come into direct connect with the panelist. We will get the question, pass it on to the panel. The panel will decide who will answer, and the answer will be passed on. So till this point of time, the panelists have their privacy. But as and when if it is felt necessary that the panelist should meet the desired person who desires advice, then we will put that in touch. But till then, the names of the panelists would not be officially revealed. My phase 2 तशीच job seeker आयल्यारी soft skill personality development training panel members and privately check whether they can help and find the same process like in the business part. And funding is also on the anvil at a later stage, something like seed capital or what that will we'll go along as it comes by. And तू थोड्याची जागृता म्हळ्यारी भानप असं म्हणून म्हाका दिवंक का हें एक फिलिंग येव नये आमची गल्ल्यान तू की बाबा हांव CSN मेंबर असो म्हाका हें काम मेळ का म्हणून. Because what happens is Magal own business ashil tari I need to follow some commercial and functional parameters. Tantu there dogjan bastati. They meet all parameters equally, and tantu my bhana paslari we give a preference. My sense of entitlement malwari yev nahi hai. Ki baba we have a right to preferential support. आणि in case we enter into many commercial relationship which may or may not work out. If it works out, fine, it's a success story. If it does not work out, fair enough. Everything may not work out 100%, but part as friends. And no bad mouthing on the group or otherwise, because it creates some sort of a bad blood. And see, one issue based difference of opinion, as we part as friends. Tomorrow there is still an opportunity to come back together because conditions might change tomorrow. So if I have an opportunity of working tomorrow, if I start bad mouthing and getting frustrated, then the chance of a reconnect is virtually ruled out. So one thing which should always remember is never lose an opportunity. And a temporary failure of an opportunity is not an opportunity lost. It's probably an opportunity deferred. तशी विचार करून आम्ही relationships develop करकाती. The whole thing is about develop relationships between two people, because when I would rather help a friend than a stranger. So the idea of CSN is that Bhanap entrepreneurs should get together as friends and help each other.
Very well said, Gautam.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity and for your patient hearing. If I have been too fast or something, I'm sorry. We are running short of time because of my delay, so I skimmed through the presentation. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Gopinath.
Thank you, Gautam ma'am. That was a very nice presentation and with detailed.
Thank you.
Right now. Thank you, Rajan Kalyanpur ma'am and Gautam Amladi ma'am for giving the brief about the KSA CSN activities in their opening statements as well as detailed presentations. The main subject, the main program today, Sharath Yellur. Sharath Yellur ma'am is a commerce graduate from a Bangalore University. He is a chartered accountant and a lawyer. He specializes in tax, regulatory advisory, income tax, GST, RBI, FEMA, SEBI, company laws. In his professional career spanning about 18 years, he has been actively engaged in advising corporate across sectors like IT, financial services, real estate, infrastructure, and consumer sectors. He represents corporates at the Income Tax Tribunal and other appeal forum. An avid sports enthusiast, Sharath was part of the Karnataka state cricket team. Oh wow. At the junior level, under 16, Sharath is a member of the finance committee of Sri Chitrapur Mutt, Shirali. I now hand over to Sharath Yellur ma'am. Sharath Yellur ma'am, please take this proceedings forward and do share all the budgetary provisions that are going to impact us as citizens and business folks. Sharath Yellur ma'am?
Yes. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So Jai Shankar to everybody. First of all, a big thanks to the Chitrapur CSN, KSA CSN initiative for giving me this opportunity. I think initially Rajiv Kalyanpur ma'am said that I am an expert. I don't think I'm an expert, because if I think I'm an expert, then I will stop learning. So I will try my level best to decode the budget and try and give my views, my thoughts, and I have tried to customize this to try and talk initially on the policy announcements, and then later on I will get into tax aspects. It is a presentation which has quite a few slides. It is running up to about 50 plus. But I am mindful of the time. It's already 7:45 zal hai. So I know it is closing in on dinner time. I don't want all of you to fall asleep. So I will try and cover up for the time, and I'll restrict it to maybe 45 minutes with about 10 minutes or so in the end to have any Q&As to the extent possible. Again, a few housekeeping announcements. Whatever questions you have, maybe you can put it in the chat box, and I will try to see if I can answer it towards the end, time providing. So I'll just start sharing my presentation. Discuss what?
Yes.
Why discuss?
Okay. So Union Budget 2021, I think, was a much awaited budget. Budget anyway is something which all of us await every year, but this time it was more important because this was the budget that was being presented in the backdrop of a pandemic hit economy, not only in India, but also worldwide. So in fact, I think the finance minister mentioned in her budget speech that this is only the third time in the history of independent India that a budget is being presented in the backdrop of a contracting economy or an economy that is going down. But perhaps the first time that a budget was being presented in the backdrop of a contracting economy worldwide. The previous two situations where the economy was contracting, it was only because of India-related reasons, where only Indian economy was contracting. But here was a situation where it was a worldwide phenomenon. So in that sense, this is a one of a lifetime kind of budget. Anticipations were quite high. People were looking forward to this and were very anxious about this. And in my view, I think personally, the finance minister has fared fairly well, I would say, in terms of delivering a good budget. And the immediate reaction, if one could have seen, the stock markets reacted very positively. As I speak, I think the markets are at a notch above 50,000. The Sensex is about 15,000, 50,000. Nifty also crossed briefly 15,000 today. I'm not seen, but I think overall there are positive sentiments on a net basis. So as I move on to my presentation, so what I have done is I have split my presentation into few compartments. One, I'll talk of a few budget highlights. In my view, what are the top 10 key highlights of the budget? And thereafter, I will talk about the tax related changes. And there, what I have done is to split that into various sections. One for individual taxpayers. Second, for small business entrepreneurs, small businesses. Third, for charities, charitable trusts. Fourth, for
All are requested to keep their audio on mute and video also off.
Right. Thank you. So then charities and then corporate taxation, and then I will get into a little bit of indirect tax changes, custom side, and a little bit of GST. I also have a sector-wise analysis based on industries, automotive, consumer, real estate, infra, and so on and so forth. So time permitting, I will try to see if I can spend some time on that. This is how I have organized this presentation. So getting into the budget highlights, I would rather pick a few phrases that the budget speech had, and this was what I liked. The first one where Nirmala Sitharaman was quoting Rabindranath Tagore, that faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. So why this is important is because the budget started off on a very high note of keeping the faith with oneself, and therefore the resilience that Indians and moreover the Indian economy has shown in the past. I think there was quite a bit of optimism. On that note, this was a very good point to start with. The other quote that I picked up and something that is closer to me is cricket. And that's what I liked. And all of you may be aware of the historic Australia series that India team had recently. And that also resonates with faith, because as the Indian team had faced the challenges in Australia, I think what kept them high on their morale was faith. Ultimately, they came out successful. So it's a good thing to see this in the speech of the finance minister. More importantly, that there is a lot of faith. So what are the 10 top key highlights? And please bear with me, some of this may not be of interest to most of you or some of you, but I thought it is important to spend some time on the high points of the budget, and I have listed down 10. To me, the first one, which is the most important as of today, it is not so much about budget proposals, but about removing fear from the minds of the people. That itself is a big booster to the economy. And in that sense, on a positive note, there is about 35,000 crore that is allocated for vaccination. For the first time, the healthcare allocation has jumped up to 82%, which is fairly high, which is understandable also. And in my view, this should be the single most agenda for the government to ensure that they give protection to all its citizens. Because like I said, if there is confidence built in the people's minds, then that itself is enough for the economy to improve. And on that note, I think the finance minister has done well to allocate as many funds as possible, and they should focus more on getting most of the people vaccinated. It is a Herculean task to cover the population, but if they are able to do a good job by reaching out to as many as they can, I think it's a good initiative. The second most important thing is the budgetary spends. So again, for the first time in the recent past or in the history of Indian budgets, there is a 15.6% of the GDP, gross domestic product. GDP is the size of the economy, and about 15.6% of the economy size has been allocated for budgetary expenses. It has never exceeded 13.5% in the past. So in that sense, numerically, this is again a good indicator. Mind you, this is on the backdrop of a contracting economy. So the denominator, which is the GDP, is fairly on a low now because of the pandemic. And in that sense, 15.6, and if the numerator is the budgetary spend, numerator by denominator is 15.6%. It will appear to be high, probably also because of a low denominator, because the economy itself is at a low right now. Third, and very important from investment standpoint, is for the first time again, the government has formally introduced what they call as a policy for disinvestment and privatization. And we have heard about disinvestment in the past. For the last 3-4 years, we have been hearing about disinvestment. In fact, in the last budget, what is disinvestment? Disinvestment simply means that there are a lot of government assets or government enterprises, public sector enterprises as we call. For example, the LICs of this world, which is now coming up with an IPO. So in the past, the government has been attempting to disinvest or sell their shares in these public sector enterprises and use the monies for making up the fiscal deficit in the budget. They have failed miserably in the past. For example, last year, they set a target of 2 lakh crore of disinvestment, and they achieved only 10% of it, less than 20,000 crore. So their report card on disinvestment is pretty bad. And this time, I think they are fairly serious about it. They have set a policy, and they're aiming for about 1.5 lakh crore of disinvestment. And it is very important. Why? Because we are staring at about 10% fiscal deficit. There's a gap in the balance sheet or in the income and expenditure of the government where the deficit is almost 10% of the economy, which is fairly high. And they are planning to bridge the gap by government borrowings, market borrowings, and 1.5 lakh crore of disinvestment. So this is a very, very important component of bridging the fiscal deficit gap. So it's very important that the government gets its act together and realizes these proceeds, or at least most of it, if not all. So the other important thing is the finance minister spoke about privatizing 2 banks and one insurance company. Again, this is the first after the 1969 bank nationalization, because for the first time, they are boldly talking about privatizing 2 banks. It could be any banks. It could be UCO Bank, IOB, Bank of Maharashtra. There are so many banks that are doing the rounds, but 2 of them are sought to be privatized. I think it's important. And also a insurance company. So New India Assurance, as we all know, is already privatized in the sense that it's a listed company. There are other insurance companies, which one of them may be taken up. This also syncs well with the plan to open up foreign direct investment in insurance up to 74%. Currently, up to 49% is allowed FDI in insurance. So I think opening up of the insurance sector for FDI plus privatization of insurance goes well as a plan, provided they achieve the plan and implement it. That's very important. The other important thing they've spoken about is infrastructure boost in terms of spending on infrastructure and monetizing government's infrastructure assets. So we have the highways, the National Highways Authority of India, NHAI, has a lot of toll roads across the country. They are revenue yielding. Railways has a lot of dedicated freight corridors and other assets. There are the Transmission Corporation has a lot of grid assets, transmission assets. The Airports Authority of India has a lot of airports which they still own and operate in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. I think the plan is to monetize as many of these as they can, put it in separate special purpose vehicles, what we call as infrastructure investment trusts, and then invite private investment, disinvest, get the money for themselves. I think this is a good initiative. Again, proof is in the pudding. We'll have to wait and watch if they are able to implement. But as I see it, this is like a do or die situation. Otherwise, the government is staring at a pretty big fiscal deficit. Moving on, the fourth important thing, and this is why the markets reacted instantly, positively, no COVID tax. This was a big expectation that most of us in the professional fraternity had. Most of you also would have read it in the papers. Oh, there is a new tax that's coming. How is the government going to fund its COVID expenses? This was the biggest highlight of the budget. No COVID tax, no new tax. I think thumbs up to the government and to the finance minister for boldly ensuring that there is a no new COVID tax. So the question is, okay, how are they then going to get their tax revenues? The revenue secretary says that we are now going to ensure that we expand the tax base, get as many tax filers as we can. And if we expand the tax base, then automatically it will increase the tax revenue. I think it's a very good thought. And they have seen the positive experience from GST collections. The GST collections in the past was hovering around 1 lakh crore a month. Off late, it has gone above 1,10,000 crore a month. It is going upwards. So that I think is a good confidence booster for the government to say if we are able to broaden the tax base, then we can collect more taxes. That's the correct way to go. There's a fifth point. Development finance institution is being sought to be set up. Again, this is in relation to infrastructure, channelization of infrastructure investments. Sixth point, again, a very important point. All of us know about the bad assets lying in the balance sheets of banks, the NPAs. These are all stressed assets, and the balance sheets of banks are not looking good. For the first time, the government is talking of setting up an asset reconstruction company or asset management company. What will it do? It will take over all the stressed assets from the banks and other government enterprises, pool it in a separate vehicle or a separate company. Initially, the banks and the government will be the shareholders, and then invite private investment into this or sell some of these assets to alternate investment funds and other buyers. Today, there are a lot of buyers who are ready to pick up these assets, provided this is done efficiently. I think this is again a very good initiative. Again, only if it is implemented properly. This will go a far way in cleaning up the balance sheets of banks and in faster realization of stressed assets. Point 7. Not many would have seen this or not many would have read this, but there is a small corner in the budget speech where there is a lot of focus being given on standardizing higher education. They are talking of setting up a new higher education commission, standard setting, accreditation, regulation, and funding. Good initiative. And I think the point which
all are requested to keep their audios on mute, please. Please do not disturb the proceedings. Thank you very much.
8th point, there is again a new point. There is a national education policy which is already there. Last year, the Modi government released this NEP. Under that, there is a new National Professional Standards for Teachers, NPST, that is sought to be introduced, where for the first time, I think about 92 lakh odd teachers in both the public and private sector are sought to be covered under this professional standards sort of scheme, where there is a focused approach in ensuring that the quality of education and teachers is tracked and importance is given to that. So here are a few points on, I have put this up because this is very important from ensuring that our quality of education is increased. So like I said, 92 lakh teachers are sought to be brought under this professional standards for teachers policy. And for the first time, and I was very impressed by this, we are talking of a unique indigenous toy-based learning for all levels of school education, which is a good initiative. There's a national digital education architecture. So everybody today is talking of digital economy, digital and electronic modes. I think the education is definitely going to go more and more digital. So there's a framework set up for that. And importantly, for children with hearing impairments, the government is working on standardization of Indian sign languages. Again, a very important thing that they ought to have done much earlier. But anyway, it's a good thing that they're looking at. Other good part is senior and retired teachers will be taken in for mentoring other teachers. I think this is a brilliant idea. This is also a good thing that they're talking about. Other last bullet point is that the students will not be now evaluated only on their academics. They will be evaluated from cognitive levels and from all other aspects as well. I think this is a really good forward-looking education policy, I would say. It will take time to implement, but at least there is a starting point, and good that they have started thinking of these lines. Point number 9, the government has introduced what we call as the production-linked incentives. This is essentially to boost domestic production in India, manufacturing. So India realizes that it is on a back burner when it comes to factories and manufacturing. We are nowhere when we compare ourselves with China. So the government is very keen that there is a boost given to domestic manufacturing. Till now, there were about 14 sectors or so which were covered under the incentive scheme. All that it says is if you put X rupees in India as investment, we will give you Y rupees as cash incentive, depending on the turnover that you achieve. I think this is a very good scheme. So they are expanding this to make it from 14 to about 20 odd sectors. Last point, again, a first digital census is going to happen soon. And till all of us know of the census and how the census happens, we are now talking of digital census. So I think the government realizes that everything is going digital, and most of these points are really forward-looking. But what is very, very, very important is how do they implement this? I think if all of this, or even let's say 75% of this is implemented, economy will definitely reach the 5 trillion mark, which Prime Minister Modi has been aiming for sooner than later. Couple of misses I wanted to highlight. There is a marked absence of targeted support for distressed sectors and households that lag behind in the recovery. Now, we have all been listening and reading about the different shapes of recovery: V-shaped, U-shaped, horizontal, vertical, etc., etc. Now, I'm talking of a K-shaped recovery. K means what? The upper portion of the K means those people who are doing exceedingly well. Like they say, one man's blood is the other man's bread. So some sectors have done exceedingly well during the pandemic time. If you look at the edutech sector, you look at the companies like Byju's and Unacademy, they are doing exceedingly well because they found an opportunity in the situation. Whereas the other traditional sectors, some of them are not doing well. You look at travel, you look at hospitality, those businesses are suffering. So one would have thought that the government comes up with a focused scheme for supporting the distressed sectors. That has not happened. There is no discussion in the budget at all, or how do they bring up these distressed sectors. MSMEs, there was some discussion about allocating some funds for MSMEs, but again, no comprehensive vision. So I think these are the two key misses, but on balance, I would think it's a fairly optimistic budget, provided they get their pull up their socks and get their act together and start implementing. That's the key. So I will not spend too much time on the economic indicators, but some quick statistics. The GDP has contracted by about 11%, and about 7.5%, 7.7% to be precise. The government is projecting about 11% GDP growth. But if you really look at it, 11 minus 7.7, it's about 4% net growth on a normative basis. So even if we achieve that, I think it will be a good outcome. The fiscal deficit, like I was saying, it is about 9.5% of the GDP. It is at an all-time high, understandable, because the government is trying to spend money and create the scope for growth. And like I said, if they have to bridge the fiscal deficit gap, most important is to achieve their disinvestment and privatization targets. That is the most critical part. There's a lot of borrowings as part of these bridging the fiscal deficit gap. So in the short term, there is some signs of the inflation going up. So but both the government and RBI will have to watch out so that it doesn't result in exceedingly higher inflation. The current account is on a surplus simply because our exports during the pandemic hit time have been more than the imports. So there is a surplus on the current account side. The rupee has depreciated by about 4 rupees or so compared to the last year same time. The bond yields are holding steady. FDI is at an all-time high. So if all of these plans of the government, privatizing banks, privatizing insurance, inviting FPI, so for the first time, the FIIs have been invited to invest in infra assets. The FPIs are now allowed to invest in infrastructure assets. So coupled with the plan of the government to spend on infrastructure, plus privatize infrastructure and monetize some of the infrastructure assets, like I said, the road assets, rail assets, I think this is going to attract a lot of foreign money, which is a good thing. Now, moving on to some of the tax proposals, I'll spend some time initially on the personal income tax side. So there is no change in the income tax rates. So for individuals, to summarize, today there are two different regimes. So in the last budget, the government had introduced a simplified tax regime where the slabs were a little different, or the tax rates were lower, like I've put in the slide. If you see, there is a second column, simplified tax regime. That is what it was. And there is the old regime. So what is the difference? So if anybody has taxable income of up to 2.5 lakhs, then no tax under both the regimes. Between 2.5 lakhs and 5 lakhs, there is no difference. It is 5%. 5 lakh to 7.5 lakh, here is a difference where on 2.5 lakh under the simplified regime, you will pay tax at 10%, whereas under the old regime, you pay tax on 20%. So there's a differential 10% on 2.5 lakhs, which is 25,000. Again, 7.5 lakh to 10 lakh, 15% versus 20%. So there's a 5% difference, which is again 5% into 2.5 lakhs. It's about 12,500. Add that to 25,000, it is 37,500. Then 10 lakh to 12.5 lakh, there's a 10% difference. So it is about 25,000. 37,500 plus 25,000, it's 62,500. So then again on the last bracket up to 15 lakhs, you have 5% difference on 2.5 lakhs, which is again 12,500. Add up all the differences, you will get about 75,000 of difference, which means under the simplified tax regime, you are paying less tax to the extent of 75,000, and above 15 lakhs, it's the same tax rate. But mind you, under the simplified tax regime, most of the tax deductions are not there. What is there is the only two that you see. And in the current times, I don't know if the second bullet point is going to be of any use. Transport allowance, conveyance allowance, and per diem allowance, which is exempt under the, that is the only allowance for salaried people which is exempt. Today, all of us are sitting at home, working from home. And while we get transport allowance and other allowances, I'm not sure what happens to these deductions. While on the regular tax regime, you will get a lot of, while you pay 75,000 tax more, you get exemptions for standard deduction, your house rent allowances, your LTC. LTC, they have now come up with a new scheme, which I will talk about a little later. All your other investments like your health insurance premium, the LIC premium, interest paid on house property, self-occupied houses, all of this you get deduction, and this is what you don't get, and what you pay more is 75,000. But effectively, for higher earning salaried person who is already in the 30% tax bracket, without a doubt, the old regime will work well. And also, people will continue to invest. People will buy insurance products. People will, buy houses. So therefore, if most people are anyway going to do that, many of them may not come under the simplified tax regime. They will continue under the old regime. Anyway, in this budget, there is no change on the personal tax front. So this is a summary of the tax rate which is there. And there is a high surcharge for HNIs. And if you see under the current regime, including surcharge, the highest tax rate that will be paid by a person earning more than 5 crores. This is all in millions. If a person is earning more than 5 crores, almost half his income he goes and pays tax. So on a lighter note, somebody used to tell me that if the tax rate is 30%, for 3 months in a year, you're working for the government. That is what somebody said. So it is like here, for half the year, somebody is working for the government, because for every rupee you earn, you have to pay 50 paise back to the government. Of course, you will be having incremental income. But the way you look at it is, for a very high earning individual, he almost pays 53% tax. Moving on. So these are some of the available deductions that are there for taxpayers under the existing regime. Like I said, HRA allowance, then the LTC, then there is the other investment related deductions. So pretty much I would think, while the new tax regime is there, the new old tax regime is something that most of the payers, taxpayers will go by. Moving on, like I said, no changes in the tax rates for individuals. The maximum rate for individuals is at a high of 43%, and no changes, exemptions, or deductions under the simplified regime. No relaxations in residency rules for standard employees. So we had a lot of NRIs who were working abroad in the Gulf or elsewhere who came to India, and they sort of stayed in India, obviously, because they had to be at home. They could not go back because of flights not operating. Now, for these citizens, what happens is that there is a tax rule which says that the moment you cross 120 days of stay in India, then your global income becomes taxable. So if they are earning some income abroad, while they would have come to India during this pandemic time, and if they stayed over 120 days, their global income is taxed. Normally, people plan their visits to India in a way that they stay below 120 days so that their global income doesn't get taxed. So this is something that most of the NRI community was looking forward to, that the budget will at least clarify or give them a relief that the 120 days rule will be relaxed, but that has not happened. So the 120 days rule has been spoken about in a different context, where the NRIs are now permitted to open what we call as one-person companies, OPCs. And there the requirement for the shareholder to stay in India earlier was 182 days. That has been relaxed to 120 days. So that is the context in which the 120 days was referred to, but not in the context of giving relief to NRIs from their global tax. Senior citizens, I know there are a lot of senior citizens in this audience. If you are a senior citizen who is more than 75 years of age, you have something to cheer about. You don't have to file your income tax returns going forward. All that you have to do is give the details of your interest income and pension income to your bank. They will calculate the tax, they will deduct the tax from your interest income, and they will pay the tax to the government. Matter ends there. I think this is a music to ears for senior citizens. Again, a very good initiative. Third point, taxation of ULIPs, unit-linked insurance plans. As all of us know, ULIPs are both quasi-insurance, quasi-investment products. And till now, ULIP redemptions were tax-free. So what they have done now is to treat ULIPs on par with equity shares or equity-oriented funds. To treat it on par with the units of mutual funds or equity-oriented funds. What they're saying is, if the annual premium payable on ULIPs, and not only on one ULIP, across all your existing ULIPs going forward, any new ULIPs that you buy after 1st February 2021, if you are going to pay more than 2.5 lakhs of premium on ULIPs, that will no longer be eligible for exemption when you redeem it, and you will be taxed. However, you will be given the same treatment like that of an equity share, which means if you're going to sell it and make capital gains on that, the tax rate will be about 10%. Moving on, another good development for returning NRI. So if NRIs return back to India after spending better part of their career or lifetime abroad, and if they come back to India, what used to happen is that whatever savings and investments they used to retain abroad and whatever was income earned on that, Indian government used to tax it, because when they come back, they become like you and I, a resident individual, and their global income becomes taxable. So an amendment has been proposed that for these kind of individuals, whatever is their global income, which is the yields and the interest on their investments abroad, those will not be taxed in India, and or India will give credit for the taxes that they pay abroad. Basically, the tax on that comes down. Again, a good thing for our global citizens who are residing abroad and who want to come back to India. So this is again a good development. The next and the most important development for individuals and mostly for salaried employees is now going forward, the contribution that they make, the employees' contribution to Provident Fund, if that is more than 2.5 lakhs a year, then whatever is the interest that is earned on that contribution will no longer be eligible for exemption. Today, any interest accrued or earned on your EPF, which is with the Provident Fund, is exempt fully, irrespective of how much you contribute. A person may be contributing, lakhs and crores. Today, I read in the paper that they had come out with some data or statistics that there are HNI individuals who have 100 crore plus money in their Provident Fund account. This is the government Provident Fund, the EPF, and all their interest is completely tax-free. If you see on the right side, I have put a table. Today, the voluntary PF is earning the highest interest rate of 8.5%, which today is fully exempt. So as of today, that's the best place to put your money in. If you are a salaried employee, you can contribute more, what we call as voluntary PF, in addition to the 12% mandatory PF that the employer would deduct. So if you put your money in a VPF, you would have been earning 8.5% interest, completely tax-free. So the post-tax yield is at an all-time high of 8.5. So what the government is saying is that we never wanted the provident fund to be used as an avenue to earn income and not pay tax on it, especially for high income earning individuals. So therefore, they have said that anybody who's contributing more than 2.5 lakhs a year from their side, this is not the employer's contribution, this is the employee's contribution, the 12%. So it is both the 12% plus the voluntary contribution somebody would have put in extra. Both these components put together, if it is more than 2.5 lakhs in a year, any interest that you earn on that, you have to pay tax on it. So the post-tax return therefore drops to 5.8% from 8.5%. So therefore, the public provident fund, the PPF account, that is still not touched by this rule. So today PPF is earning roughly about 7% of return. Post-tax, it will continue to be 7% because today there is no tax on PPF interest. So however, what happens is that there is a limit of how much you can contribute to a PPF. Every year you cannot contribute more than 1.5 lakhs. Of course, you can contribute, but they will not pay you interest on more than 1.5 lakhs. Whereas under the government PF, there was no limit, which is what they have now proposed to introduce. So going forward, therefore, what should be your strategy? So what perhaps you should do is, and this is my thought, you can consider it and you can see whether it works. So first you have to take 2.5 lakhs. From that, see how much is what is your contribution, the mandatory PF. Let's say if it is 1.5 lakh. So what is left is 1 lakh. So that 1 lakh you can put as voluntary PF because you still earn a high 8.5% pre-tax yield on VPF. So up to 2.5 lakhs, try and earn that 8.5% interest. Beyond that, another 1.5 lakhs you can put in PPF, which will give you 7.1%. And if you still have more money that you want to put in PF, then maybe you can come back to the voluntary PF itself. Although you pay tax, note that you will still, earn about 5.8% post-tax. So if you go with this combination, I think on an average with the new rule, you will still end up making a decent amount of return on your PF contribution. So it's a mix of voluntary PF and the public provident fund or a PPF. Because other things are there, you have RBI bonds, Kisan Vikas Patra, NSE and Bank FD, but those don't really give you that high returns. And this strategy is good for a high income earning person who has a very low risk appetite, who doesn't want to take risky positions in the market. I think this is a good strategy to go with going forward. Of course, you have the option of NPS, which is the National Pension Scheme. NPS is also giving you good yields at a market level. So that's the other option which you can weigh against the provident fund options that you have. And if you are very, high risk person and you don't bother much about risk, the markets are always there for you to invest in, provided you have the time and you are okay with losing money here and there once in a while. Next change is on advance tax on dividend. So there is some tinkering that is done, and advance tax proposed to be payable on dividend income only on declaration or payment from the next year onwards. Now coming to the LTC related changes. So what has happened, and this came actually sometime the last year during the pandemic. So what they said is that if LTC is leave travel concession, which an employer normally gives for you to go on a holiday, and whatever are your holiday costs, travel costs for you and your family, that is exempt. And that works on a block basis. So current block, that is 4-year block, current block is 2018 to 2021. Once in a block, you can get the LTC exemption. Now, obviously, last year, most of us could not travel out. We could not go out on our holidays, and therefore the LTC component was not being used, or the exemption was not being used, because since it was not being used, it was getting taxed. The government came up with a very good innovative idea, and I think it's a good idea. So what they said is, if you're going to spend 3 times of your LTC, so for example, if your LTC is, let's say, 50,000, you're going to spend 3 times, 1.5 lakhs, and that is supported by GST bills, which carry at least 12% minimum GST rate, then we will give you the exemption. 36,000 per person is the maximum exemption that you could get. But I think it was a brilliant idea for the reason that on the one hand, they protected the LTC exemptions of people. On the other hand, they also gave a boost to the economy to say that you go and buy for 1.5 lakhs, we will give you the exemption. The supply chain side now could sell their goods and services for 1.5 lakhs, and that sort of gives an impetus to the economy. So they have legalized, they have brought this scheme in the law. That's the only thing that they have done. And therefore, like I said, this is available for all expenditure from 12th October 2020 to March 31, 2021 on all goods or services liable to GST of 12% and above. And the amount of exemption shall not exceed 36,000 per person or 1/3 of above expenditure. So the maximum expenditure exemption per person is 36,000. So if you have number of people in the family, accordingly that exemption will go up. If you are 4 people in the family, it will be into 4, which is about 1.44 lakhs. And this amendment, mind you, is only for 1 year. It is only for the running financial year of FY 2021. And next year onwards, we all go back to the original LTC scheme. The other important change that has been done to boost the housing sector is, so in the last budget, there was an additional deduction of up to 1.5 lakhs for interest taken on loans by first-time buyers for affordable houses, the value of which did not exceed 45 lakhs, the stamp value, or what we call as the circle rate. So that should not have exceeded 45 lakhs. And if you buy such a house, then you get an additional 1.5 lakhs of interest in addition to the 2.5 lakhs, which is already there. So you could get about 4 lakhs of interest deduction. That has now been extended by 1 more year, which means this is good for the real estate housing side industry, because they can then push the affordable housing sales. So even for them, they have got some tax exemptions if they build affordable housing projects. So for the real estate builders, it's a win-win. They get exemption on their income, plus their sales can go up because of the additional 1 year given by the government. The only thing is that the loan eligibility period for sanctioning the loan is proposed to be, it has to be before 31st March 2022. The other connected thing is there is a rule in the income tax which says that if your house property price is less than 90% of the circle rate. Circle rate is the stamp duty rate. If the stamp duty rate, let's say, is 50 lakhs, and if your purchase price under the contract with the builder is less than 90%, which is less than 45 lakhs, then that 5 lakhs was deemed as income in the hands of the buyer, and you had to pay tax on it. The seller, the builder, also had to pay tax on it. So what they have now done is to relax the 10% to make it 20%. So what they are now saying is, if the cost of a house is less than 2 crores, 20 million, less than 2 crores, and if you buy a house between 12th November 2020 and 30th June 2021 as a first time purchase. So mind you, this is not for repeat buyers. This is for people who are buying their houses for the first time owners. If their house value is less than 2 crores, then you can still buy it at 80% of the circle rate. So assuming circle rate is also 2 crores, then you can buy it at 1.6 crores. This is what they are saying, that 1.6 crores or above. Any price between 1.6 to 2 crores can be a purchase cost without having to pay any tax on the discounted price. So this is again a good thing, because this helps builders to increase their sales. Good thing for the buyers also, because they can negotiate harder on the prices from builders without having to pay any taxes. The other important thing is now for the first time, and this is what I was saying, that the government's objective is to try and expand the tax base, or expand the number of people who file income tax returns, so that more the people filing, more will be the taxes. So this effect, what they have said is that if a person is not filing his tax returns, and if he's a person who used to pay TDS at 50,000 every year. So the rule says if in the last 2 years, so for example, if in financial year 1920 and financial year 2021, if a person like me as an individual, I have been getting income on which I have been paying TDS, I have been suffering TDS of more than 50,000 every year. And if in this year, that is 21-22, if I don't file my return, then the person who's paying the income to me, he is entitled to do TDS at twice the rate. So take example, your interest income on bank deposits, or if you take rental income, both of them today have a 10% TDS rate. If you happen to not file your returns going forward, then what it will mean for you is you will face a 20% TDS on your interest and rent income. So better that you file your returns on time. So it's not only about filing returns, you have to file your returns on time, which is normally the July, August of every year where individual taxpayers have to file their returns. So this rule is not only for individuals, it's across all categories. So I think the government's objective here is to try and get as many people to file their tax returns, because today if we see in terms of percentage of people who file returns compared to the population, it is in the very low single digit percentages. It is very low. And of that, government audits very few cases. So they are trying to broaden the number of people who file returns and try and get more income out of them. So this is a very important rule you have to watch out. And my advice would be that you file your returns and not miss. Of course, this doesn't apply to people earning only salary income, because for them anyway the employer has to deduct full tax. So there's no value addition by you filing the return. If you're getting only salary income, or if you're a non-resident like a NRI, then you don't need to be bothered about this, because in both these cases, the payer of the income, either your employer or anybody else who pays to the NRI, has to deduct full tax. So that's the reason why this rule doesn't apply to them. But for all other categories like interest income, rental income, which suffer TDS, and if the TDS is more than 50,000 in a year, and if you've not filed your returns, you will face a higher TDS rate going forward. Deposit insurance regulations, there is some amendments that is sought to be made to the deposit insurance rules. Currently, the deposit insurance cover, last year they increased it to 5 lakhs for people who have deposit with banks. All of us have heard about some banks getting shaky, and people are worried about not getting their deposits back with the bank. The government introduced a higher insurance cover of 5 lakhs. So they are now going to tweak this and make it more efficient to be fully prepared for a situation if a bank goes down under. If the bank sort of winds up, then investors won't lose their money, and up to 5 lakhs there is an insurance. They're trying to make this more efficient. Procedural changes in terms of filing your returns, you have to file it on time, and there was this concept where you could file a revised return before the end of the financial year. Now that timeline has been reduced to 9 months, which means if you had time up to 31st March, so for example, for the current financial year 2021, you could file your return. The last date for you to file was 31st March 2022. Now that they are saying we will reduce it to December 31, 2021. You would have anyway regularly filed your return sometime in August 2021. If you missed it, you would have filed a belated return in March 2022. Now they're saying the last date for you to file a belated return, or where you have missed filing your regular return, is December 2021. So they have reduced the time. Similarly, they have reduced the time for the government doing audits of your tax return, what we call as income tax assessments. That is made more shorter. The agenda is get people to file their taxes sooner than later, get the government income tax officers to do their audits earlier, and try and fast track their revenue collections. I think these are the things that they're trying to do. They have not tinkered with the tax rates, but in terms of procedures, in terms of their collecting taxes sooner than later, getting more and more people in the tax net. That is what the government is trying to do. The last point on litigation rationalization for taxpayers whose income is less than 50 lakhs. If in their audits there is a audit adjustment of more than 10 lakhs, the government is now saying we will not put you on the regular course of appeal. We'll set up a special committee, what they have called as a dispute resolution committee. We will try and give you a faster resolution rather than make you go through the appeals. Again, it's a good business-friendly initiative. We'll have to wait and see whether the dispute resolution committee will try to solve the disputes or will create more disputes. Because on the corporate side, we have a similar committee existing for large corporates, for foreign companies. And there, this same committee concept is not working at all. In 9.5 out of 10 cases, the committee will agree with the income tax officer. They normally don't give you relief. Moving forward, now in terms of tax returns, the government has now today so many avenues to collect all your data. If you go onto your income tax portal, there is something called as Form 26AS. Form 26AS is nothing but a report which the government gets automatically from various sources, where the TDS done on your income is captured, the advance tax paid by you is captured. Now it also captures all the transactions you have done, be it on the market, any financial transaction that you have done, any property transactions that you have done, all of that goes and sits in that portal, what is called as Form 26AS. The government is now saying, and I think they have already implemented this, they are saying we will use that data to give you a pre-filled income tax return. All that you have to do is look at it. If you think there are some corrections to be made, you will you can then file it. Of course, I think there may be some fields which they may not allow you to tamper with, and that's the difficulty. So the government today has a lot of information about you and your transaction. Like they say, nobody's life today is private. With the Facebooks and all the social media of this world, your privacy is gone. So even in terms of information gathering, the government is now a step ahead of you. They have all your information. So you better watch out on the discipline that you bring about in your financial transactions. Labor code, so there's a labor code that is being planned, which will come next year or this year, April onwards. There is a new labor code that is going to come. It will fundamentally change the way in which the compensation structures will be designed by your employers. For example, it is going to say that 50% of your CTC, 50% of your compensation has to be as basic salary. So this is going to come soon, and I think this is a path-breaking change. There are a lot of other fundamental changes that are coming in the new labor code. Now, if I compare this change with the change on the Provident Fund interest taxation, right? So more basic means more mandatory PF. So 12% gets calculated on your basic. So if the basic goes higher, your 12% also goes higher, and therefore you run the risk of breaching that 2.5 lakhs of threshold. So keep an eye on this. Now I just I'll move forward to this section on. Just give me a second. Charities. So what they have done is, and they've tinkered with some of the tax rules for charitable institutions. Because the first bullet point, in the income tax world, we have something called as notified hospitals and notified educational institutions, where their income is fully exempt. So currently, the exemption applies to only those hospitals and notified, and these are only notified hospitals. I'm not talking of the other regular charitable trusts which run schools and hospitals. These are a few notified hospitals where if their receipts doesn't cross 1 crore earlier, they get the tax exemption. Now that 1 crore has been increased to 5 crores. However, the other catch is that if a trust has many notified institutions, earlier this 1 crore used to be calculated per institution. So if they had, let's say, 10 institutions, all notified, all of it was less than 1 crore, they were fine. They would have got the exemption. Going forward, if they run 10 institutions and cumulatively their receipts or income is more than 5 crores, that is 10 crores, they stand to lose. So this is an important thing. But this helps smaller trust, smaller trust running a fewer institutions. This will help them. The other change is for charities, any corpus donation that they get today is exempt. There is no tax that is payable. But what used to happen is some charitable institutions used to, take exemption when they get the corpus donation, and also when they spend it, they used to say, "I have spent my income," and they used to take double deduction. So that lacuna is being addressed, and that is being resolved. And going forward, corpus donation will have to be parked in specific investments in bank FDs and other investments. And if you spend from that deposit that you make out of the corpus donation, then you don't get any exemption, because simply that the corpus donation itself is exempt. So you can't get an exemption when you spend it. However, they have also said that if you spend from the corpus and tomorrow if you replenish that corpus back, at that time we will give you a exemption. So this is again a good initiative. While on the one hand they have removed that lacuna to say we will not give you a double deduction, they are also trying to say we are not preventing you from spending your corpus on your projects, and if you replenish it, we will try and give you back the exemption. If a charity was borrowing, many a times what happens is charities have to borrow from banks to fund their projects, and for various reasons, because the average interest rates works well. So if the charities used to fund their projects from banks, and if they were spending that on projects, some charities used to say that I have spent on charitable work, I should get an exemption. You could not have received an exemption in the first place, because what money you are getting is from borrowings, it's not donations. So therefore, that rule also they're trying to plug to say that if you're spending from borrowed money, then you will not get a deduction. However, if you are using your donations to repay the borrowings, then we will give you an exemption. So this is the correct way of looking at it. The last one is charities sometimes overspend. If they have 100 rupees of income donations in a year, and if they end up spending, let's say 120, obviously they are digging into their reserves to spend that extra 20. So they used to carry forward this 20 as a loss and set it off in the future years. There were many court rulings to support this. But personally, I think that's not the correct way to do it, because when you spend 20 rupees out of your reserves can be only two things. One is your corpus, which is anyway exempt in the first place. So if you're overspending out of your corpus, you ought not to get any extra deduction, because that amounts to a double deduction. The second portion is every year you are allowed to park aside 15% of your donations as general reserves. That is exempt. So you could spend from that kitty also. If you're spending from that kitty, again, same principle, you can't claim a deduction for the second time. So I think this is again the correct way of doing it, correct way of looking at it. Of course, there are some rulings in the past which have upheld the carry forward of laws. But in my view, I think they have realized that people are trying to take advantage of some of these loopholes. Coming to small businesses and the income tax, no change in the tax rates for them. Partnership firms and LLPs will continue to pay tax at about 35%. If it's a company, the current rate is 25.17%. There's a new rule which is introduced for the first time in the history of income tax. Today, if you're buying goods, you have to do TDS. Not everybody. If a buyer's turnover is more than 10 crores and if he does a transaction of more than 50 lakhs, then he's expected to do 0.1% TDS. Now you may say, what's the big deal? 0.1% is hardly anything. Again, here the agenda of the government is to try and gather more and more information about these transactions, run some analytics and try and zero down to those people who are not filing their taxes. This is the intention. The real intention is not 0.1%. Of course, incidentally, the government advances its tax collection, because every time there's a transaction in goods which exceeds these thresholds, they will get some taxes. So the seller would have anyway paid advance tax when he files his returns. So that taxes the government is now advancing. So they're collecting taxes sooner than later. And this is important because for businesses who don't do this, and if this rule applies, then in their income profit and loss account, the expense is not allowed as an expense. So this is a very important change. And small businesses whose turnover is more than 10 crores, they have to be mindful of this. The other positive change is that the tax audit requirement has now been enhanced to say only if the turnover of a business is more than 10 crores, will they need to get a tax audit done by chartered accountants. And the other condition is that not more than 5% should be cash transactions in the 10 crore turnover. This is good for the businesses, but not so good for chartered accountants because they may lose some clients. In that sense, of course, it's good for businesses, not so good for the chartered accountant fraternity. The other change is there was this rule, what we call as presumptive taxation. So if a business is earning up to 50 lakhs of turnover, or in 50 lakhs of receipts, and this was more applicable for professionals like doctors and engineers and consultants and architects and chartered accountants. If they were earning up to 50 lakhs, then no need to maintain any accounts, no need of audit. Just pay 50%, just 50% of that 50 lakhs. 25 lakhs was deemed as income, and you had to pay tax on that at 30%. So effectively, it was about 7.5 lakhs of tax that you paid on 50 lakhs, which is about 5% or so. It was a good scheme. So what they have now done is to say that this will not be applicable for LLPs. Earlier, even LLPs were eligible for this. Now they're saying LLPs will not be entitled for this presumptive taxation. So any small businesses who are doing their business as LLPs, and if they were claiming this beneficial taxation regime, they will now be a worried lot, because then they now have to start paying tax at 35%, which is what I put in the first bullet. GST changes, again, on the input tax credit side, now everything is automated. You can claim input tax credit only if your supplier has filed his returns properly and that tax credit is reflecting in the GSTN system of the government. If it is not reflecting, then you will not get the credit. So, for no fault of the buyer, sometimes they can lose the credit simply because the seller or the supplier has not filed his returns. So the government wants to automate everything, and therefore there's no manual intervention going forward. Credits will be given to buyers only on the basis of suppliers filing the GST return. So you have to make sure that you talk to your vendors and other suppliers and ensure that they file their returns on time. Otherwise, you will not get the credit on your purchase. The other positive change is the GST audit requirement, what we call as Form 9C audit, is now no longer required. It will be more on a self-certification basis. Again, a good thing for all businesses. Again, not such a good thing for chartered accountants because one source of their revenue goes away. So in that sense, it's good and bad. And interest on delayed GST payment, now there is a retrospective amendment that is being made from 2017 onwards to levy interest on late payment of GST only on the net cash liability. So this is a good change. Otherwise, there was a risk of having to pay interest on the gross. When I say gross, what used to happen is if you have 100 rupees of output GST liability, if you have input credit of 60, you used to pay only 40. Whereas the interest mechanism was such that it was on the gross basis of 100. So that lacuna they have corrected. Then there is some change in the definition of supply. So net input tax credit rules have been made more stringent now. I think I've already touched my 1 hour limit, so I'll try to wrap it up in 10 to 15 minutes. Corporates income tax. Sorry to put out a very confusing chart out there, but this is exactly how it is. And depending on the turnover today, people have different tax rates. But the headline rate is about 25.17%. That's the third row that you see there. Domestic company which is not availing any tax incentives or exemptions, they have to just pay a flat rate of 25.17%. So compared to partnership firms, today corporates are paying lesser tax because the corporate tax rate is 25%. There is no DDT tax, so dividend is payable by the shareholder. So earlier there was a dividend tax of 20% that a company had to pay. So that is not there. So vis-a-vis partnership firm for small businesses, they can analyze whether they want to set up a company or a partnership firm. And now that LLP exemption is also taken away for presumptive taxation, this is an analysis that they will have to do. So I'll maybe just try to do a quick review of the slides to see and talk about only something which is important. The zero coupon bonds to boost the infrastructure sector. Then they've also mandated that the companies who are collecting employees' PF, they have to remit within time. So what used to happen is some companies used to use employees' provident fund money as their working capital, and there were delays in remitting the employee PF to the PF authorities. So under a tax rule earlier, so long as they paid the employee PF before they filed the corporates filed the return, they could escape from the taxation on the delayed employee PF. So that has been sought to be removed to say you have to pay the PF before 15th of every month. Otherwise, we will penalize you as in the employer. So it reduces the avenues for employees and companies to use employees' PF as their working capital. I'll just skip some of this. This is not so relevant, of course. So in the overall budget, there's a big boost that is given to IFSC. IFSC is International Financial Services Center. So in Gujarat, there is something called as a gift city, and that's the first IFSC unit that is there in India. The government is trying to attract more and more businesses into gift city, and they're giving a lot of exemptions. For example, this is mainly targeted at offshore funds, offshore private equity funds or FPI funds. They are inviting them to come and set up their shop in Gujarat and get all the exemptions for all their investments in India. Even banks, foreign banks have been encouraged to set up their branches in IFSC. This budget has now also given a boost for aircraft leasing companies. If they set up their shop in the gift city, they don't have to pay tax on their aircraft lease rentals. So there's a lot of focus on IFSC and the gift city. This seems to be the pet project of the Modi government for obvious reasons that he comes from Gujarat. So it's a big booster for the state of Gujarat. And on the international tax side, there's a lot of exemptions being given for the sovereign wealth funds. You may have heard of the Abu Dhabi Wealth Fund and other sovereign wealth funds of other countries, and pension funds. Overseas, there are large pension funds who invest in India. A lot of incentives are being given to them to come and invest in India. So I think this is a good initiative because on the one hand, you're opening up, loosening the infrastructure assets, monetizing it, inviting private investment, opening up FDI into these sectors, insurance is open. So in my view, in the short run, we will see a lot of foreign monies entering India because of all these initiatives. All of this I have covered, so I'm just skipping. So indirect tax, I spoke about it when I spoke about the GST changes for small businesses. It's the same. Just skip this. Okay. And this is important. And I'll tell you a funny incident. As soon as the budget was presented by Finance Minister, a couple of hours later, about 5 to 6 clients of mine called me, and they were all worried about one thing. I said, what is there to worry about? They said, what is this agricultural infrastructure development cess? I heard that this is being introduced on alcohol beverages. So they were a worried lot because their bottle of scotch they thought was going to cost them more. Because what has happened is the government has introduced what they call as this agricultural infrastructure development cess, where to channelize investments for agricultural infrastructure, they want to collect a cess separately only on a few imported products. And this is also levied on petrol and diesel. But don't worry, none of the landed cost of any of these products will go up. All that the government has done is they've said we will charge a AIDC separately, but at the same time, we will reduce the basic customs duty on imported products wherever we are levying these AIDC, or we will reduce the additional excise duty on petrol and diesel when we are levying this cess on petrol and diesel. So the landed cost for you and I doesn't go up. But the moment somebody heard that they were levying 100% cess on alcohol, a lot of people started, getting worried because they thought their bottle of scotch is going to go up, because on imported liquor, there is 100% cess. Of course, if you see the fourth row here, what has happened is the peak customs duty of 150% has gone down to 50%. So the 100% duty has been reduced, customs duty, and at the same time, 100% cess has been introduced. So it's self-cancelling in that sense. But not knowing this, people were a little worried that their alcohol is going to cost higher. And when I told them that you don't have to worry, I'm sure that they would have, had their scotch that night. That was on a lighter note. But this was the only new cess that the government plans to introduce. But like the FM said, we don't have to worry about it because it will not increase in the landed cost of the products on which they're going to levy this cess. So I will just end here for want of time. I had a few more slides where I had given some analysis on each sector. Maybe I'll circulate this within the group for your reading. But this will take some more time, and I've given you a lot of food for thought. I think it's good for your tummy as well as of now. So I would rather wind it up at this stage. Thank you for a patient listening. If there's any quick questions, I'll try and take it.
Thank you, Sharat, Yellur, Ma'am. Thanks a lot. It was a very nice presentation. And I'm sure you covered a lot of budgetary changes that have been announced on 1st February. Now I request those who wish to ask questions to use the raise hand. To begin with, I have already one participant who has raised his hand. I would invite him. Sudhir Burde, ma'am, can you please unmute yourself and start the video and ask your question?
Next day itself, after the budget, the DFS secretary had clarified that the government will not be putting in funds, but the funds will come from the banks, both the state-owned banks and the private banks. But there is, I feel, I mean, it's my personal point that there could be a conflict of interest. On one hand, the banks will be putting in funds in this ARC and also selling their NPS to them. So this has always been looked at, slightly strictly by RBI. I do not know why the already ARCs which have been set up, have not been doing well. Most of them are in private sector. Second is what is being, I think, envisaged is hardly 10 to 12% of the gross NPAs of 15 lakh crores will be taken by this ARC. So I do not, while I am slightly optimistic that at least a beginning has been made, but looking at, the historical performance of these ARCs, and if banks are the shareholders and sponsors, I think basically it's a non-starter.
Yes, Burde ma'am, I would only go with one point, that at least they have started on a good note. And now we'll have to wait for the fine print of this whole ARC scheme and what is it that they're going to do. And maybe then, for now, I would reserve my comments and rather wait and watch as to what exactly will come out.
Very true. I think we need to wait, because on one hand, the government could have set aside some funds for recapitalization, but maybe the fiscal deficit has slightly decelerated the whole process, maybe. Anyway, it was nice listening to you, ma'am, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Guru Nandan, ma'am, you raised your hand.
Yeah, hi. See, one of those things that I was looking at was whether it is the development financial institutions or the banks that are being privatized, or the GIC being privatized, or looking at LIC coming out with an IPO, it seems like, this 1 year is just insufficient to do that. Because even in the past, there have been many cases, like, for example, let's say the smaller government institutions which have gone private or had gone for an IPO have taken quite a bit of time to do that. And for a valuation of a company like LIC, I think it is going to take much, much more time. So is the government trying to make a short work of what they think should happen, or are they really serious about disinvestment?
So I think they're very serious about this time around. Like I said earlier, for the first time, they have formally come up with a policy for disinvestment and privatization. They have put down a charter there. It is a separate annexure in the budget speech. And when I read it, I thought, wow, this is, I think, a brilliant agenda and charter that they have. And the second reason, like I said, is they don't have much avenues to bridge the fiscal deficit. All that they have is the borrowings. The other source that they can bridge their fiscal deficit is only through the privatization proceeds. Yes, history has shown us that they have not been doing well at all. Like I said, last year they did only 10% of their 2 lakh crore target of disinvestment. They could do only about 20,000 crore. So they have failed in the past, but I think it's high time that they pull up their socks simply because they don't have an option. They have to get their act together. I agree it will take time. For example, they're also planning to monetize vacant land banks. Some of them are, next to the Nariman Point. You imagine the value of these lands. You have these BSNL lands and MTNL lands. They are worth crores and crores of rupees. They're not really doing anything about it. Yes, land transactions are not easy in India, but still somewhere they have to start. They have to, set up some special agency, put the right people, invite specialists from the corporate side, get their advice and get it going. Otherwise, they're going to fail miserably on the fiscal deficit side.
Yes. Aside from that, the infra trusts, or even the asset reconstruction company that is being formed, or for that matter, the DF that is being planned. I mean, how is it different from what has already been there in the form of many institutions that the government has set up earlier? And what is going to be new in this whole, exercise? Because they've done that before, they've not been successful. So is this just another one that is coming up?
Yeah, I would say only time would tell what is new in this. I think the only thing that is new is the initiative and the optimism. That seems to be new to me. And yes, it has failed in the past. If you look at IFCI, Industrial Finance Corporation of India, that concept has failed. And when HDFC and ICICI were running as separate corporations, perhaps the government should have, not taken them through the bank route and retained them as Bs. They did not do that. So they've got their, the whole game wrong in the past. What is new is only the what is today their optimism and their own interest to get this working. Otherwise, again,
because in some ways, maybe the SIDBI and the NABARD story may be positive, but otherwise, the ICICIs and the IFCIs did not do what they were supposed to do.
Right. Let's see what they're going to do.
Any more questions? Please raise your hand.
Sharad, I had one more small question on the labor code that you talked about. Now, on the labor code, you did say that almost 50% would be considered basic salary. I thought what is being considered is wage, and that wage can have many components, including basic salary. So while you might need to pay, PF on the wage, which includes multiple components, you might still be able to, take advantage of, as a company, maybe, you could still take advantage of only paying the minimum PF that is of say 1800 rupees and stop there. Would the government have an issue with that?
I don't know. Maybe you're right that it's 50% is wage, and my only point was to link it up with the 12% on that, and how that is linked with the 2.5 lakhs new rule. So I'm not fully clear on how that works. So I may have to reserve my comments on that. I'll have to just see the fine print a little more and see how it evolves.
Okay. Just as a one more question around the same subject on PF. Now, on the one hand, if PF contributions, that is, individual contributes more than 7.5 lakhs in terms of PF, then you do have a perquisite tax that is it is considered as perquisite.
Right.
Would there be some kind of double taxation in this whole process, or do you think that
No,
that is not the case?
No, because 7.5 lakhs is all employers' contribution. Employers' PF plus superannuation plus other welfare funds. If it exceeds 7.5 lakhs from the employer side, that is when that perquisite tax comes. Here we are talking of employees' contribution.
Yes.
So I don't think there's double taxation.
Anyone else? Any questions?
पुढे जण जेवण आवाज केल्यानंतरच का मग आय थिंक
पर मळ्यातच ती मगाला घरच की कोणाला म्हणून ना Rajan Kalyanpur, ma'am. Anything you would like to say or add?
No, nothing much. It was a very good presentation and very nice listening to him. Very nice listening to you, Sharath, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I request Uma Trasi Pachi to do the Sabha Samapti Prarthana.
Okay. Nandantu sadhaka sarve vinashyantu vidushakaha avastha shambhavi mestu prasannostu gurus sada sarve bhavantu sukhinaha sarve santu niramayaha sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukhamapnuyat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thanks to all.
Thank you.
Thanks to all for attending and making this a very great success.
Yes.
Thanks to Sharath Yellur, ma'am, for presenting very well, and to all at KSA and CSN for organizing this. Thank you very much. Thank you all of us.
Thanks a lot, Sharath. Very well documented and researched presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Good night, Jai Shankar.
Good night.
Yes, I forgot.